my fellow readers, this is I, Dark Symphony 777 with a fan fiction review. As always, link to the story will be in the description below. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, click on that bell for notifications, leave a comment in the comment section below on your thoughts on the story, any future fan fictions you want me to read or review. And finally, this is my opinion. My opinion is not indicative of everyone in the world, so please respect that. So, going back to the mole. This is the mole. Imaginative name. Very imaginative name. Just the mole. Written by In the Nick of Time 410. So close to a 420 joke right there. I'll tell you what. It is a Ace Attorney Fire Emblem crossover. I don't know how that works. I don't. I don't care. Let's see if it works. And it's another mole. It's another the mole story. I reviewed two of those stories in the past: Trader Abroad and Saboteur's Island. I like to take it aside because Chris Etchers is back. He finished Agent's Elevation. That story is going to be reviewed in the future. I'm happy about that. But this is not Agent's Elevation. This is something else. I'm not trying to tell out the story, I swear. I'm not. So, yeah, this review is going to be somewhat unique, mainly due to how it's going to be structured. So I'll explain about it when I get to the second half of it. So let's get started. The plot. It's a standard mole plot, basically X amount of contestants, this time 16. 8 from the Fire Emblem series, 8 from the Ace Attorney series, and they basically compete in challenges for a group pot and try and find out who the mole is. Fine, you know. Again, like I said in Saboteur's Island, you've seen one mole story, you've seen them all. It's kind of average at this point in time. So that's fine. Characters. What characters? There's no characters in this story. There's a lot of... The story is like 90% dialogue. I'm like just dumbfounded. I'm completely dumbfounded on why is there so much dialogue, and that kind of ruins the characters, except with the exception of two being Ike and Simon. But outside of those two, there's like, oh, who are you? What motivations do you have? Why are you competing in this challenge? Phoenix, you're a lawyer. Why do you need the money? And Ike is like, I'm a Marine. And Simon's like, I was a former criminal. And they're they're the only at least decent characters, and their whole shtick is just basically, boo. They hate each other. It's like, boo. Boo. It was something. It was probably something. Just, it was better than nothing. I'd rather take just those two characters on an island by themselves, just booing each other. And I like that story better than this, in terms of the characters. Oh, I'm too critical on this. Oh, I'm sorry. We'll get, like I said, don't worry, this one's gonna be different. So that's plot and character. Grammar, there's a lot of grammar errors. Probably the worst grammar error is the challenge where Frederick was kidnapped and stuck on an island. And then Lucina's like, we gotta find Frederick! And it's supposed to describe where exactly Frederick is, but instead of Frederick, it says Lucina. I'm like, what? What? Wait, what? When did Frederick and Lucina switch places? Like, did Frederick suddenly just teleport using magic? I don't even know who half the Fire Emblem characters are. I know who the Ace Attorney characters are. I don't know any of them. I don't know most of the Fire Emblem characters. I know Ike, Lucina, Micaiah, and that's it. And that is it. Just those three. And the other five Fire Emblem characters were like, who are you? Who are you? Who are you? Who are these people? I don't know who you are. What game are you from? My friend says they're like, most of them are like from Awakening and Fates. But I'm like, I don't know those games. I know Awakening, but what the fuck's Fates? Oh, that's the game with Corin, right? Ah, fuck that game. Fuck that game. But that's I'm okay. I am patting at this point. Let's just finish this. Let's just finish this first half. So the plot is just standard fare. The characters are garbage outside of Simon and Ike, and even then, that's just very bare bones. There's plenty of grammar. There's plenty of grammar words. What about the pacing and the writing? The pacing's bad. Everything is pretty much very dialogue heavy. Again, this wouldn't be so bad if not for the fact it's a mole story. Dialogue heavy and mole story does not really work. I mean, I've read plenty of mole stories. This is the worst one. This is far and away the worst one. It's like, if I had to put a percentage, I literally would have to say 90% of the entire story is literally dialogue. I said earlier, it came off as a joke. No, I'm actually serious. 90% of the story is literally nothing but dialogue. Granted, halfway through the story, we do get at least a little bit of prose, but it's not even. No, that's just like bare minimum. That's like only like a couple sentences of prose. That's just nothing. And even then, during the challenges, like the challenges breeze by, is like, okay, where's the excitement? Where's like any challenge? Where's the immersion? There's nothing. It's just empty. Nothing but dialogue. Okay. And I'm like, I've seen dialogue stories work before. Like, they can work. It just doesn't work here because of the type of story that it needs to be. If this was any other type of story, like if it was like two characters, Ike and Simon, put their personalities in the story in a room, lock them up, and leave them nothing but dialogue. That can work. This story as a whole, and this is like 73,000 words. It doesn't work. Not to mention, there's too many characters. Like, why? I don't know why. The pacing is way too fast for the type of story this is. Like, most stories need to at least pace it out depending on what type of challenge it is. You're supposed to give the illusion of a reality show. Like, if the challenge specifically requires the pacing to be moved up, then the pacing needs to be fast. If it requires the pacing to be slowed down, then it slows down. Its pacing constantly moves and changes depending on what's going on at any given moment. Like, it can go fast, it can go slow, and it can switch on a dime of how the challenges work. Instead, what we got is a bunch of dialogue saying, like, what's going on, like, what's actually happening. There's nothing happening in the challenges outside of just dialogue. That's just like, what? What? Like, I didn't feel anything. I didn't feel any emotional attachment. I just felt nothing. So, would I recommend this story? No. I really would not. Favorite part, and probably just the running gag of Simon and Ike booing each other, like, it was at least funny. I just found it like it was a so bad it's good scenario because everything was so bad about the story that I had to find something that just stood out, just completely hilarious. It's like, all right, that's my favorite part right there. Just that one running gag. And finally, what would I change? This is where the bulk of the story is. So, let's get started. So, unlike other reviews where I go on these long, complicated, goes about these details over what to change, what to fix, what's good or bad. There's simply not enough detail in the type of story that the author is trying to concoct to really deliver what the author was trying to do. This whole situation is similar to the admitting my feelings situation. In that story, it was a Mario story that's inadvertently in the Super Smash Bros. Because the author is convinced oh, it's called Super Mario, not Mario. The title stuff like Mario Kart and Mario Party and stuff like that. I don't know. And Mario and Luigi and Paper Mario sort of deal. So it's why? And where I actually destroyed that story, but everything in that story was based around the pacing. The pacing was just so fast, it completely destroyed any good the story could have had. This situation, all the problems stem from the actual writing itself. The fact that everything is so dialogue heavy, it just leaves the entire story just empty and barren. It gives us nothing to attach on as readers, no way to at least emotionally attach ourselves to the story, nothing like that. However, I think I'm actually going to help you out. Hence why the bulk of this video will be this part, fixing the story up, at least helping you. Now, before I actually get into the nitty-gritty, I never really went this heavy into dissecting the story and trying to help the author fix it. I guess you don't have to take my advice. This is just my opinion. I would at least suggest, asking your friends, asking other authors. In this context, go ask Chris Etchers. He's the guy of the mole stories. Ask him for advice on how to improve the story. This is just my take. You don't have to take my suggestions. You only have to at least listen. So let's get started. So what should we fix? Well, to figure out how to fix this story, we have to look at an example of this type of story done right. Cue Chris Etchers. Now, I will not make lies. There have been mole stories. There have been these types of fan fictions that are based off reality shows sprinkled out throughout fan fiction's history. However, Chris Etchers was and is known as the guy who kind of popularized the type of story. Not because he basically he went above and beyond on how this works. Before him, they were either incomplete or they were just rush jobs that didn't really kind of capture the nuance on how the shows worked. Chris Etchers was really the first author to really balance that nuance with interactivity and create something truly unique. Hence why a lot of authors who do mole stories at least reference him once, because he was just that popular in this subtype of story. And not even mole, any story based off Amazing Race, Survivor Series, they all took cues from this guy, and that's to be commended. So, what made Chris Etchers' story so unique? It was basically the philosophy of show, don't tell. Basically, show, don't tell is a writing tool used to express telling the story through the character's emotions. I'm actually having a brain fart. I should have actually... Oh, yeah, there it is. Show don't tell is a technique used in various kinds of text to allow the reader to experience the story through actions, words, thoughts, senses, and feelings, rather through the author's exposition, summarization, and description. This is basically help us get deeper into the immersion of the story. It's really only used in fiction, when Lord of the Rings sort of thing. Ernest Hemingway was probably the well-known most user of it. He was the guy who, while he wasn't the guy who created, he's probably the most well-known author to utilize that technique to the best effect. There are other authors who used it. He's just the most well-known. Basically, it's to give us it's to basically immerse us through the character's eyes, where we actually picture everything going on. Pictures, stuff like that, through the character's eyes and the character's senses. We become the character. However, and this is actually a very beginning tool. A lot of authors are actually especially ones who are just starting out, are guilty of not exactly following this philosophy. And this is actually a very common mistake. A lot of authors do it. It's something that you have to learn. The Mole is different. The Mole was unique in that it used both show and tell. I know that sounds really weird, but hear me out. Basically the story attacks you on two fronts with information. It gives you the immersive opportunity through the character's eyes and ears and senses and everything. However, since how the story is structured, how the story plays out, like a reality show that actually encourages not only interpretation, but also interactivity through the various clues throughout the story to the mole's identity, it gives us both a show and a tell. With show being the character's reactions and the tells being the various descriptions stuff throughout the story. Like, for example, like, I can't think of any off the top of my head. Oh yeah, Noki Bay. Noki Bay. It describes the mystery of Noki Bay because but it also subtly might leave clues. We have to interpret what tells are clues. We don't know what they are. The clues are hidden in plain sight. We just don't know. Like, another example would be in Trader Abroad. Every time when a character is eliminated, we get a part where they're about to load in, and they actually describe the vehicle they're about to leave in, and they kind of showcase this also symbol. This is an example of telling, where it might not seem like it, but it's a tell through the actual summary, through the exposition and the description, that might be a clue. Identity of the mole. It's a really juxtaposition of how show don't tell works. It's really, really weird on how the author actually manages to subtly subvert it, but also kind of still do it at the same time, due to the fact it still showed a lot of interest, because some of the clues were only shown through the character's eyes, but some of the clues were hidden in plain sight through the exposition and the descriptions. So it's really weird. That is the main problem of the story. There is no description. There is no senses, no feelings, no anything outside of pure dialogue. And with this type of story, it just doesn't work. I do like the idea of. Hold on, let's go back. This story does not show don't tell. It doesn't even show and tell like Trader Abroad does or Savage's Island does. It really is weird in the fact that everything is just pure dialogue, weakening what would be a better story. I guess the author wanted to do something different, but this is a case of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I mean, if I had to summarize anything, I would honestly just say go read Trader Abroad, Savage's Island, and Agent's Elevation. Just take cues from that and just add it to the story. That's really it. But I want to help. I do think this story can actually be very good if given the right tools to succeed. So just hear me out. So let's start from the beginning. First off, we don't know who the host is, outside of his name being Nick. This is probably the biggest problem. Throughout each of the mole stories, whether or not it be Chris Etchers or anyone else, the host is a valuable piece of information. Not only does he provide great context to the situation going on, he also plays sort of a manipulator's role, kind of pointing out any mistakes that the players or the readers might miss and pointing them out. Not to mention, they're also instantly recognizable. The first thing I would do is change the host from. There's one more thing. Not to mention, there's also the host is usually someone in the stories, someone with connections in some way to the players. In Chris Edgar's stories, it was McCalibu, who was the host of the Star Carnival from Mario Party 8, where a lot of the characters in the first and second in the first season were acquainted it through Mario Party. And this, in another author, Princess Toadie, the mole was a Monty Mole. Makes sense thematically. If you're going with his whole faction warfare, it would actually make more sense to have two hosts instead of one, especially with 16 characters. Like, make it sort of a team dynamic sort of deal instead of every competitor for itself in every other story. Try and be unique. And I think the idea of having all these characters can actually work, provided you get help. Honestly, I think this whole thing, you said it yourself. You're 18. You were just beginning to start out. I think the story is honestly this specific idea was way out of depth. I think you could have just started from worked your way up and had this kind of working on it, because Chris Etchers worked on each of these mole stories for years and had a plan on each one meticulously. Same with all the other mole authors. I only keep bringing up Chris Etchers specifically because he's just the guy. He's the guy. He's the face of these types of stories, so it makes sense for me to constantly reference him. So with the host, you need to have two hosts that with each host having some kind of connection with the not only with the characters, but also with the franchise. For the Fire Emblem side, I would pick Anna, the RNG goddess. She's always in some way, shape, or form connected to through the games as the tutorial person. As for Ace Attorney, I don't know, just pick Francisca, or pick the judge. Have the quirky judge and the somewhat serious, cryptic Anna. I could see them playing off each other with the judges, non sequiturs, and the way Anna works. I don't know that much about Anna, so assuming kind of playing off each other just fine. I can see that. Instead of a traditional, have some way to, unlike other mole stories, have some way to set up this contest to justify having all these characters. Mainly because in the rules of mole, there's usually always 10 characters. There's always 10 players. The moles, that's another thing about the mole compared to a lot of other reality shows, is there's not really a lot of contestants. I think that Solitary show in Sci-Fi was probably has the least amount of contestants. They usually only had about 7, 8. I think. So it always varies, but the 16 characters is just a little too much. Unless you try and figure out some way to justify it, I don't see. You would have to cut it to 10, 12 at most. You can't do anything more than 12 without trying to justify some kind of weird gimmick. If you are going the gimmick route, do some kind of team warfare sort of thing. One team is all the Fire Emblem characters, another team is all of the Ace Attorney characters, and the mole is in one of those groups. Still keep the core dynamic of trying to figure out who the mole is. What I think would make the most sense is honestly, the thing would make the most sense would be Simon and Ike. It would be the team captains. They kind of butted heads. They kind of I'm gonna you could actually throw in a couple chapters at the very beginning to try and justify trying to do this. Simon and Ike, they meet up and then they kind of piss each other off. And it's okay, fine. And then they hear about the contest. I'm gonna get all my friends to beat you. Well, no, if I can do it first. And then they go and try and they sign in all their friends to try and win the things. Okay, one of you is going to be the contestant. Well, 15 of you are going to be the contestants. One of you is going to be the mole. Problem is, none of you are allowed to know. And to make sure you don't see any kind of weird differences, you basically try and encourage one of the characters, whoever's the mole, whichever your prizes you don't win goes to a charity of their choosing. Team Ike versus Team Simon. That's honestly what the story felt like at times. It was just Ike and Simon versus, and everyone else like in the background. Capitalize on that. Make it team based with Ike, one captain of the Fire Emblem side, and Simon Blackwell, the captain of the Ace Attorney side. Like, they get all their friends, they compete. One of them is the mole. You go from there. In terms of the actual challenges itself, I actually like the ideas of the challenges. You pick the 3-question challenge at the end. That's fine. However, we need to actually see meat and potatoes of it. We need to actually see the characters actually competing instead of hearing what they're saying. You did try to rectify this in the second half by giving us, at least giving us some prose, but it's not enough, and it's also at the very end. And even then, it was still very dialogue heavy. You need to find some way to pad out the actual challenges so that way we see what the characters are specifically doing. Like, all these aggressors and snipers, have them have some connection to the Ace Attorney or Fire Emblem series, like the snipers. You can do like a neat little homage to the actual Fire Emblem franchise by having the snipers be actual sniper archer classes from the various Fire Emblem games, like Rolf or Sheenan or Astrid. Like, one of them could be Astrid. I'm honestly just thinking of archer units from like the top of my head. Like I said, I'm not too familiar with Fire Emblem, so sue me. Or the aggressors, have them be Fire Ace Attorney characters. Like, you could do so much, but everything is just so blanket that it just leaves everything hollow and empty. Like I said, there's a lot of potential to make this story good. There's just nothing to latch onto as a story. Next off, the actual clues. I didn't actually read the clues because I didn't really care. I just honestly didn't care of what the mole did or how they did it or any clues that might have been left behind, because there was just no reason to want to be excited about the mole or who the mole was. I didn't care. I really didn't. So another thing, instead of doing 2 challenges, you basically do 3 challenges with each episode, with like the first half being 3 challenges. Like, whoever wins the majority challenges gets that whole team immunity, and the loser, has to take the quiz. So it's a neat little wrinkle on the mole formula with, like, it's, team based. They still do all 3 challenges, but and also like a wrinkle, like if it's a curved song, like they win, like whichever team wins the first 2, the third one has a chance for as like a secret exemption. That's another thing. There's like way too many exemptions. Exemptions are supposed to be like very, very rare. Like, if you just constantly hand out exemptions, then it weakens that whole idea of suspense when there's constant exemptions all the time. I mean, the idea with Simon, like, hey, you want an assumption? Like, yo, that's cool. It just weakened a lot of the mole. It weakened a lot of the mole ideas. Have 2 hosts, have it team based, have it be more for charity than anything. Like the team, like whoever wins the team, whoever wins, claims like superiority and something like that. Like, haha. And finally, actually describe the areas. Describe what's going on, what the contestants are doing, any clues that they might spot. Again, this was touched upon in the 4 corners area. You could also give more relaxing downtimes. I think it's a neat idea to, like, every time, since every challenge takes place in like a different area across the United States, it would make a neat little sense for between each chapter. There's like a little intermission where we each get, the characters' thoughts, them hanging out, them just doing something, Simon and I doing something stupid. Like, honestly, you can even make all the other characters kind of garbage and have literally all the characters be carried by Simon and Ike, just like the story as it is. Sorry, I had to answer a door. Where was? Oh yeah. So yeah, the story, like Simon can carry like the majority of the character development. That's what they did here. It makes a lot of sense for them here. Keep the actual winner, keep the actual mole. Like you can like since the people who actually read the story and read it through, you could if you want, you could just change who the mole and who the winner is. It really makes no difference to me, but I at least want I also want some clues, like some hidden clues, some clues hidden in plain sight that you don't really think about. Like that's another thing. In a lot of these mole stories, not only do they say something, or also the host that might say something that may be interpreted as a clue if you read between the lines, and you have to be really careful. But just general stuff can qualify. Like a lot, like one little thing, like in how it's phrased in that particular sentence, can be a clue, but it's just hidden that well that you don't think twice about it. That's honestly that's the big thing you need to do. You need to leave concrete clues cleverly disguised as something someone's doing or something someone's seeing or just general ambiance sort of thing that we don't think twice. And that's probably the biggest thing about the story in the fact that it's a mole story. Like it's supposed to give us a sense of mystery and wonder over the simple fact that we want to journey with them on their act and the clues to find out who the mole is. Question is, who is the mole? Like, and with all this just heavy dialogue, it just dilutes that idea to nonsensical levels, simply because there's just nothing to latch on. There's no concrete clues. There's no visual cues. There's barely anything. There's barely anything of substance, and and that really kind of stinks because I did like the idea, but the idea is not even started. It can't even be botched if the idea wasn't even started to flesh out. Like it's like a bud that can easily turn into an actual flower. I can actually see this idea manifesting in an actual amazing story. You just need practice. That's what I think all this stuff can come down to. You just need more practice to come back to. What I honestly in the nick of time, or Nick, here's what I suggest you do. At the end of the day, practice, because this is a big example of someone who was out of their depth, trying to make a story they just did not have the skill or the nuance to be able to do. You said it yourself. This was your first attempt at writing, and you're 18. You could still learn. Like writing is something that takes practice. It takes a lot of practice. All this skill analyzing and dissecting everything. I didn't learn off the bat. This took 15 plus years and reading hundreds upon hundreds of stories. It took a while. And the same thing could happen too. So what I suggest is you can either talk to Chris Etchers, that'd be the cheap way out. I also would heavily suggest just practice. Like you have something. You have something going for you. And it's not unlike the other stories where I said it's botched. It's like it feels it hasn't started yet. It's just so enclosed and not even started on the idea. It feels like honestly the story actually feels more like an actual rough draft. Like it's a rough draft of something that can be and definitely should be really good, but it's just so enclosed and so incomplete that I can't even tell if it's botched or not, if it's bad or good, because there's just nothing there to connect to outside of Ike and Simon. That's literally it. And I mean that in the most sincere thank you, because this story can be good. I can easily picture the story being good. It just takes time and you need practice. That's what it boils down to. If you have the practice and you develop your skills, because again, these types of stories, you can't just do it like that because so the story was published in October 14th, 2019. It was last updated in March 15th. Let's look at Chris. Let's just look at Chris Etchers for real quick. Trader Abroad. It it it's first published in 2007, and it was finished about over a year later. But based on the last chapter in in Agent Elevation, it took him a long time to even try and figure out how he was going to do everything. And then you had like Saboteur Island, which was about 5 years long, which was huge. And then Agent's Elevation was actually stretched out like really, really long. Like before the last couple of chapters, the last update was like in 2018. So that was another 5 year long gap. The story just really comes down to you really need to practice. It just boils down to it feels like a rough draft of an incomplete story. Like it's your first attempt at writing a story. That's good. Like you had Simon and build off them. That's really the only good part I had about the story is those two characters. If you take what you did with Simon and Ike, give them all personalities, get a team dynamic, give them two hosts, give them identifiable hosts. Like we don't know who Nick is. Have them be have them do their have them be their concrete. Granted, you have to do like research on both Ace Attorney and Fire Emblem. Like I said, I don't know anything about Fire Emblem, but I feel that this story can succeed more than any other story where I said, "Oh, it has botched execution, box this, box this." This story can succeed. I can easily see that happening. It honestly just comes from you need to take the time. You need to practice. It might take years. It might take a couple years for you to get the practice to figure out how everything works. You need to plan everything. You need to figure out how. You need to think ahead, far ahead before you even do it. Who would be the mole? How would you develop everything to revolve around that mole? How would you disguise who that mole is going to be? How are you going to concretely disguise the clues over who the mole is along the side? Figure out uh, the actual challenges. You got to pace them out all a lot. It takes a lot of practice. I mean, I need you no disrespect. For a first attempt, this is not bad. Like, I mean that sincerely. It's not bad for a first attempt. And this is why I did it this way, because so I can help you. So, you don't have to take my advice. You really don't. You can shun it, you can throw it in the garbage, you can accept it, you can seek help from other authors. Like there are beta readers. You could ask other people who are more knowledgeable about these types of stories, like Chris Etchers or Princess Toadie or any other author. You can ask them for help, saying, here's what can you help me with this? Chris Etchers was more than willing to talk to me about the whole thing, about him finishing up. He actually has me to thank for finishing Agent Elevation because he really wants you to review that story. But the point still remains, as a rough draft, as someone's first attempt, I have to at least give you credit over trying, especially as someone at 18. Because again, unlike a lot of hobbies, a lot of these stuff, writing is not something that is easy to do, especially in these modern times, because reading and writing takes a very patient mindset. A lot of kids these days, they're very impatient. They just care more about social media and wanting to be popular on the internet. I don't really care about being popular on the internet. Okay, I have 1 million subscribers. Fine, man. Okay, I'll just be myself. I don't know. People like me. All right. Fine. I have a small dedicated fan base. I hope you could be part because I know you didn't subscribe to me. But for a first attempt, it can be better, but it's not bad for what it is. I know I repeated myself at the end there, but I really wanted to hammer this point home that over the idea that that it's really rough, but it can easily be smoothed out with time. This will be just a waiting game. You're 18. You have all the time. You're still young. You have years. There are some authors who are actually in their 40s and 50s, like Phineas and Redux, like those Xena stories. He's actually in his 40s. Like he's still writing Xena fan fiction because he likes Xena. I can't blame him for that, and I still like his stories. Uh, you just the story is just a matter of learning new skills and putting them onto the story. Another thing I would at least ask just someone that suggested this idea to me, hi Lady Armster, is write short stories. Write short stories to learn and refine your skills, figure out what type of writing style you want to do, and then slowly iron out those kinks, and then use what you learn to fix up these chapters one by one. Again, it'll take time. It will. Like, there's no doubt about that. The best stories usually do. But I can see the story really succeeding. And if you ever redo the story and you refinish it, hey, I may review it again. So, I honestly hope this helped. I know this was really weird how I did this, but I think in this type of situation, I think it was really warranted. Because I honestly felt like the author really wanted help, and he really wanted to see me review the story. But instead of reviewing, I thought it'd be prudent to help him out, throw him give him an arm up, saying you can do it, you can succeed. I genuinely believe this story can succeed if given enough time. If given the time, the care, the passion, I can see the story succeeding. I can see the story being very good. It really needs the time. So, this is Dark Symphony 777, and cut.